Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar, New Rendering Power for Design and Architecture using V-Ray for Rhino. Join Ben Hurlbut as he demonstrates the brand new rendering experience of V-Ray 3 for Rhino. V-Ray has been redesigned from the ground up. The new user interface is clean and simple. With quick presets and streamlined controls, you can focus on being creative without worrying too much about the technical stuff. Now it's faster and easier than ever to create great-looking renders right in Rhino. And let me introduce you, Ben. Ben became a member of the Chaos Group Baltimore office in 2014 as a 3D artist, and after obtaining a master's degree in architecture in 2008, and has since gained over 5 years of architectural experience in the field. So Ben has extensive knowledge of V-Ray, Revit, Rhino, Grasshopper, 3ds Max, and SketchUp. So he's the guy. Before we get going, here's an overview of what we do in Novedge. Novedge is one of the largest online stores for design software. We offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's need. So we don't just have all the V-Ray products, we have Rhino and anything you can need. For more daily software news and limited time promotion, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+. We also have a blog. And coming up next week, AutoCAD LT 2018, What's New and Improved. Last but not least, today's webinar is free and also has been recorded. It will be recorded. And if you want to rewatch it, just go on the Novedge YouTube or Vimeo channels. And now, without further ado, I'll let you directly onto Ben's screen. Take it away, Ben.
Thanks for the intro. My name is Ben, a 3D specialist with Chaos Group, and welcome to New Rendering Power for Design and Architecture using V-Ray for Rhino. A little bit about myself. Again, I'm a 3D artist and AEC specialist with a master's degree in architecture with about 5+ years in the AEC industry. And if you'd like to reach me directly, you can email me at ben.hurlbut@chaosgroup.com. Now here's a few example shots made with V-Ray for Rhino, including some architecture and some product design shots and jewelry shots, and a quick overview of what we're going to cover, which includes a brief look at our design philosophy behind V-Ray for Rhino's new interface. We will then go over the major features of V-Ray for Rhino and demonstrations using a small selection of architectural and product design scenes. Now, there's essentially two types of artists who create visualizations. There's the designer and the visualization expert. Now, the designer treats the rendering as essentially one tool among many in a large toolkit. While visualization is important, it is not the primary focus. And then the visualization expert is a specialist whose primary role is to produce high-quality imagery. The visualization is the primary focus and the final result. V-Ray for Rhino's new interface was developed with designers in mind, while still having the power of the extensive set of V-Ray features available for advanced users. By default, it is easy to pick up and use to achieve high-quality imagery. This allows you to spend less time fiddling with the tool and more time on what really matters, your design. This is all without sacrificing the expanded toolset for visualization experts to tinker and tweak to your heart's content. So ultimately, it comes down to V-Ray for Rhino being easy, powerful, and fast. This leads us to the new interface. Everything you need is right at your fingertips. As an example here, we see the material editor's quick settings, which allow you to easily and quickly create many basic materials using just the settings you need. But the more detailed features can easily be accessed within the rollouts and expanded areas of the interface. You can see here the advanced material editor with all the controls available, including the ability to add additional layers. And finally, the material tab also has a material library which can be accessed in the left rollout. So let's take a quick look at the new interface. So as you can see, there's 4 V-Ray toolbars. There's the main toolbar, which has the asset editor, rendering buttons, and the show frame buffer button. There's the V-Ray lights toolbar, which has all the lights for V-Ray for Rhino. The objects toolbar with object-specific tools, and the V-Ray extras toolbar, which has the guest lens shift and batch render tool. So let's go ahead and go to the asset editor, which is the nerve center for V-Ray 3 for Rhino, which has 4 main tabs. There's materials, lights, objects, and settings, as well as an extra render button and frame buffer button. And as you can see, if we expand the right rollout, we have all the advanced settings available. And then finally, specific to the material tabs, we have the material library. So V-Ray is a very flexible rendering engine that allows you to easily switch between modes depending on what stage of the design process that you're currently in. There's interactive rendering, which is available so you can make changes to your scene that will update in the rendering in real time without having to stop and start the process yourself. This used to be known as V-Ray RT. And then we have production rendering, which is best used to achieve your final results. Although interactive rendering can use it as well, production rendering takes full advantage of V-Ray Swarm, which is our new, more advanced version of distributive rendering. V-Ray uses your computer's CPU by default, but it can also support your GPU hardware as well, which can be many times faster depending on what kind of hardware you're using. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the settings, and you can see it's easy to switch between the different modes. And with interactive disabled, you gain access to the quality preset slider. This is all you need to modify the quality of your rendering, but you can also expand the advanced panel to fine-tune your settings. But you'll notice if you adjust the quality slider, it will actually adjust all the advanced settings for you. Then you can also switch out the global illuminations settings as you could previously, but typically you don't need to bother with that anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and start an interactive rendering. I'm going to switch this to a 1-to-1 so we have a square image. And you'll notice that as I move the view around, it'll update in RT in real time. And let's try this with GPU enabled, and you'll notice that this will be many times faster. I'm working with a computer with 3 GTX Titans, so it's a little bit faster than average, but you'll notice that the rendering cleans up in under a second. I'm going to go ahead and switch the view back to where it was, and then let's do more of a final rendering. So I'm going to disable interactive. I'm going to disable progressive. This way, instead of the entire image rendering at once, it will render in what's called buckets, small sections of the image at a time. And I'm going to enable Swarm, which is our new distributive rendering solution. Now using this, I can actually modify the goal slider, and then V-Ray Swarm will try to use as many computers on my network up to that percentage that I chose. So I chose about 14%, but then as I increase it, you'll notice that more computers are going to jump in, and there'll be more buckets which are helping finish the final rendering. Now, V-Ray for Rhino uses the sun settings from Rhino to generate its physically correct sun and sky in conjunction with the physical camera built in the V-Ray. Then we also have aerial perspective, which is an atmospheric effect used to create haze and fog in V-Ray for Rhino. So I'm going to go ahead and start an interactive rendering in the scene. And right now it's set to the default environment settings, which is kind of a gray studio setup. But since this is an architectural rendering, I'd like to use the sun and sky system instead. So first things first, I'm going to enable the sun, which you can do here or you can do in your light settings inside the asset editor. And you'll notice that the sun is now lighting the scene partially, but the background is still there. And I can switch this out by going to my environment settings and switching out the bitmap for the sky. So now the scene is being lit by the sun and sky system. And you'll notice as I change the sun and sky in my Rhino document that it's changing the interactive rendering as well. If I go to my Lights tab, there's also some more advanced settings for the sun that we can modify. And since the sun is basically a light, it's listed with all the other lights in the scene. So you can make changes like changing the intensity, either by using the slider or just typing in a value. The same with the size multiplier, which affects the softness of the shadows. And then we also have the ground albedo color, which is basically the color of the sky as it reaches the horizon. So if I change this to fuchsia, you'll notice it changes in the scene as well. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to a kind of a lighter, warmer color. So the scene looks a little less smoggy. All right, next let's take a look at aerial perspective, which will simulate fog in the scene for us. So under the environment section in the settings, you'll see aerial perspective. We'll go ahead and turn it on. And my settings that I have here are a little extreme. So I'm going to increase my visibility range, which will actually decrease the density of the fog. Then you'll notice some more things will start to come into view. I'm going to make the atmosphere height a little bit lower as well. I can also change the color. By default it's set to white, but I'm going to add a little bit of color. You can make it really brown to kind of make a, if you're going for something a little post-apocalyptic, but we're going to change this color to be a little more gray. Then I'm going to increase the height a little bit more. All right, moving on. Lighting. V-Ray for Rhino has a wide assortment of features available for lighting your scenes besides using the sun. You can use an image to encompass and light your scene using the dome light. There are a variety of simple light shapes you can insert into the scene, including planes, spheres, and omni lights. Spotlights are available to create physically accurate area lights. You can convert Rhino geometry into a light using the Mesh Light tool. With the IES light, you can use IES files, such as those from lighting manufacturers, to light your scene. And then finally, we have the light list in the asset editor, which is a new feature in V-Ray 3 for Rhino to easily see, find, and modify all the lights in your scene. So I already have an interactive rendering going here. If I go to the Lights tab, you'll see that all the shaped lights are here. Then we also have the Mesh Light tool, which if you select a piece of geometry in your scene, you can use this to change that into a light. Then we have a Rhino Sun and the directional light tools. So let's go ahead and add a dome light so we can use an image to light the scene. So I'm going to go ahead and select an HDR that I have available. And there's plenty of these available on the internet, both for sale and for free. But you'll notice that the sun is still lighting the scene even though I have this environment in here. So what I'm going to do is disable the sun so that the dome light is what's lighting my scene. And I can select the dome light and increase the intensity to make it a little bit brighter. So I think this looks good, but let's say I don't like the rotation of it. And it's easy to modify simply by selecting the dome light. Then using the gumball built in the Rhino, I can just rotate it and you'll see it update in the interactive rendering. All right, now let's say I'd like to add some additional lights to the scene, like to the boat that's in the bottom left of the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into the boat itself, and then we'll place some sphere lights to kind of add a little bit more life to this. So I'm going to go ahead and use the sphere light tool. I'll select the point to place the light, and we'll set a diameter. And then using the controls within Rhino, we can move and scale the light. Okay, let's say I like this, but it's a little too dark. I'm going to open my asset editor, and then we'll change the intensity. And I like this brightness. It's a little too cold. I'm going to go ahead and change the color as well to make it a bit of a warmer light. And since I have this where I like it, now I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it a couple of times to light up the interior as well. So simply using the gumball built in the Rhino, and while holding down the Alt key, I can duplicate this light. Right now I can zoom out, and this looks about how I'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and move the view back to where it was. Right, so camera controls are very easy to use in V-Ray for Rhino. From previous versions, we wanted to make camera features such as exposure and depth of field more accessible to all users. We also added the ability to easily create images for interactive panoramas or virtual reality. So with this rendering that this scene that we've been working with, I'm going to go ahead and open the camera settings. You'll see how easy it is to just simply adjust the exposure. Although for advanced users, you can still adjust things like ISO, f-number, and shutter speed. But all you really need is just a simple exposure value. And we can also change the white balance as well. So if I select the warmer color, it'll make the overall image slightly cooler, and vice versa. Then we also have some additional effects such as vignetting, which is as easy as just increasing the slider, and you'll notice the effect. And then depth of field is a lot easier than it has been in the past. All you really need to do is set a defocus amount and pick a focal point, and you're good to go. So I'm now focused on this boat while everything else is out of focus, but what I really want to focus on are the buildings, so I'll just select a new focal point. And moving on to panorama cameras, in V-Ray 3 for Rhino, it's a lot easier than it has been in the past to set this up. All you need to do is I'll stop this rendering and we'll switch out the camera type, and then we're ready to go. There's two different types. There's spherical panorama and cube map. And then if I disable interactive rendering, I'll be able to enable stereoscopic, which will make the image 3D if we were to look at it in a pair of VR goggles. And you'll also notice if I expand the render output that the aspect ratio changes as I select the different types of cameras. So I'm going to go ahead and leave VR cube map enabled with stereoscopic and hit render. And since this is a cube map, essentially we're going to create a cube of the image to insert into a headset or to create a panorama. But since this is also stereoscopic, it's essentially creating two cubes, each with 6 sides, so you'll see that there's 12 squares. And then this can be inputted into a headset or a program specifically designed to read these, which this is a standard format. So it's usually just a matter of putting the file in a certain folder. And this is an example of that same scene where we have a cube map rendered out. And the left and right are both slightly different, which will create the 3D effect. Moving on to materials, V-Ray for Rhino comes with an extensive library of pre-made materials, along with a powerful tool set to customize those materials or create your own unique materials. There are a powerful set of textures and material layers available to create things like stochastic flakes, V-Ray dirt and curvature for edgeware, and SSS2 for creating accurate subsurface scattering for materials like skin and transparent plastics. So we'll go ahead and use this product design scene and we'll start applying some materials using the material library. We'll start with a blurry steel material. It's as simple as dragging it into my material list, selecting the geometry, right-clicking, and applying the material to selection. You can also apply materials through the asset editor to layers, or you can simply drag them into the material list and using Rhino's material settings you can select them. But in my opinion, this is the easiest way. So I'm going to go ahead and select a few black plastics for this. And we'll use a nice shiny black plastic for this area. Yeah, up next there's this kind of target logo at the end. I'd like to use kind of a shiny colored metal type of material. So I'm going to go ahead and find the metallic foil. I'm going to go with the green metallic foil and apply that. And then up next for this top area, I'd like to create a subsurface scattering material. And we're going to go ahead and create one from scratch, which is very simple. All we need to do is click on the new material and subsurface scattering. And then we can start editing the settings using quick settings. And we can also change the preset for the material really easily, like if I wanted to make this a glass instead, or liquid, etc. But we'll go ahead and switch it back to subsurface. And we'll make it a nice green color. This is a little bright, so I'm going to darken it a little bit. You can also use the slider to do this. Then just like before, we'll select the geometry and then we'll apply the material. Let's say I'd like to increase the subsurface scattering effect as well. So I'll go back to my quick settings, and then we'll change the scatter radius. You'll notice how it changes in both the preview and the frame buffer. The target symbol on the end of the earbud is still, it's kind of a different green color. And let's say I'd like to make sure to match that color. You see it's kind of an olive color. I can actually copy the color out of this material, switch to the other material, and paste it. So I'm going to paste it into my reflection, and you'll see it actually changes in the frame buffer as well. And then I'll make sure that is a little bit lighter to match the other green material. So V-Ray for Rhino has many features that help you deal with complex geometries in a fast, efficient manner. The V-Ray Clipper is a powerful tool that allows you to dynamically cut your geometry by adding a clipping plane to the scene. A feature from 2.0, we have proxies, which allow you to insert complex geometry into a scene without bogging down your Rhino model. And finally, V-Ray Fur gives you the power to easily create fur, grass, and carpet in your scene without bogging down your Rhino model with extra geometry. So starting with the Clipper, I'm going to go ahead and start an interactive rendering with this scene. And you can see how easy it is to just throw a clipper in and start cutting the geometry. So I'll go to the V-Ray Objects tab, and we'll place the clipper in the scene, which places it at 0 facing up. So I'm going to grab this, rotate it, move it into position. And then if I zoom in, you'll notice in the frame buffer that it's slicing the buildings. Well, there's a few advanced features as well. If I select it in the Objects tab, I can pick which objects I'd like to include and exclude from the clipping. I can disable Use Object Material and assign my own material. V-Ray will use whatever materials are applied to the object by default, but using this I can apply one material so that every object that's cut will use this material. So right now it's using wood, or make it a little more obvious, I have a simple red material. Here, a quick demonstration of proxy objects in action. As you can see, these are just simple geometries in the Rhino viewport. And they look like essentially a mess of triangular polygons. And these are just a representation of the proxies. So I'll go ahead and start an interactive rendering. And you'll see that the final output is actually a lot more intricate. And proxies can be easily created either from Rhino or from some of the other, almost every other application with a V-Ray plugin installed, such as 3D Studio Max, SketchUp, and Maya. And it simply creates a file outside of your scene, and then when you hit render, it references that file and starts to render the accurate geometry. Okay, now let's take a look at V-Ray Fur. So I'd like to add some grass to this patch of dirt that's in front of us. So what I'm going to do is right now I'm using the material so that I can select everything with the dirt material applied, which is just these objects here. And I'm going to just click on the V-Ray Fur button. And you'll notice right away we now have grass. The default settings for V-Ray Fur are meant to reflect grass, the appearance of grass. But I'd like to change the material from the Rhino default. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting the geometry. And typically you want to use what's called a hair material for a more optimized look, but you can actually use any material. So what I'm going to do is use one of these pre-made grass materials, apply to selection, and then we now have a more accurate looking grass. This grass is a little long. It's very easy to just jump in and start changing settings to make it look a little bit closer to how we'd like. I simply need to change the length to something shorter, and then you'll notice it will update. Now let's say I'd like something a little more natural looking with clumps of grass that's longer and shorter, and what we have is the ability to use textures to affect different parameters. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to create a noise texture. And what this is going to do is everything that's white will be the maximum, which I set back to 4, and everything that's black would be a length of 0. But I used a light range between white to a dark gray, and you'll notice now there's clumps of grass which are longer and some clumps of grass which are shorter. Okay, moving on. V-Ray render elements allow you to export individual elements of the render for advanced compositing in third-party applications. And then we have V-Ray edge texture, which allows you to create a unique extra texture for use in compositing as well. And then we have the denoiser, which is a new feature added to the version 3 release of V-Ray for Rhino that will intelligently remove noise from your final image and allows you to reduce your render time drastically. As you can see here, the difference between the denoise version and then the raw render. And then V-Ray also has several tools for advanced post-processing built right in. In the frame buffer, color corrections are powerful tools that allow you to do simple post-processing similar to third-party applications like Photoshop. This way you don't necessarily need to modify your image in those applications when the render is complete. These tools are available while you're still rendering or after it's finished. Then we have lens effects, which are powerful bloom and glare tools available right in the frame buffer. So let's go ahead and use this view, and we'll enable some rendering elements by going to the settings and the advanced settings and render elements. So for compositing, what you typically need are background, lighting, global illumination, reflection, refraction, and self-illumination. And when you combine these in a program like Photoshop, they will essentially create your final rendering. We're also going to enable extra text, which allows you to create an extra pass, which is just one basic texture. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a dirt texture, which essentially makes something along the lines of an ambient occlusion pass. Next, I'm going to enable Z-depth, which is essentially a height map from the camera from white to black. And you can use depth from camera, but I'm just going to manually specify a near distance of 500 and a far distance of 1200. Then finally, let's enable the denoiser. Now there's a lot of different settings and presets you can use, but the default one is typically fine. So let's go ahead and set this up to render. I'm going to disable progressive like we did before, increase the quality to medium, increase my render output size, and make sure swarm is enabled. And just like before, once this gets going, you'll notice because swarm is enabled, as machines receive the content from this one, they'll start jumping in and assisting in the render. And these are all machines on our local network. As this is going, I can start messing with the color corrections. And since these are post-processing effects, they don't necessarily, well, they don't increase your render time at all. This is just essentially a layer on top of the rendering. So right now I'm adjusting the exposure, I'm fine-tuning the white balance a little bit. We'll jump into hue saturation. You can even desaturate it to the point of being a black and white rendering. And since these are non-destructive, you don't have to worry about ruining, let's say, your final image. And here I'm messing with the color balance a little bit. Sometimes I like to modify this so that my shadows are a little bit cooler while my highlights are a little bit warmer. This one was actually a little too cool, so I'm going to modify my shadows again. Then other settings such as levels, and then we'll change the curve a little bit. And what's really great about this is I'm not sitting here waiting for the rendering to finish. I'm actually still working on the image while the rendering is going. So I'm not wasting any time. All right, so let's say I got that where I want it. And we'll go ahead and let this render out. And you can even save these settings out to files to use for other scenes or other cameras within the scene if you have specific settings that you like to use. Right, so then once this finishes, you'll notice it will go through one final pass, which is the denoiser. It'll take a few seconds. This only happens when you have the denoiser enabled. And it's now finished. So let's take a look at the render elements. The RGB color element is the raw render. And then we also have alpha, reflections, refractions. You'll notice some of these may be black. That's because, like for self-illumination, for instance, there's no materials in the scene that are illuminating themselves. The GI pass, etc. And finally the background. And these can be composited together in something like Photoshop. You have the extra text channel, which is, like I mentioned previously, I set it up with the dirt texture to make more of an ambient occlusion kind of pass, which can be composited over the other rendering elements. And Z depth, which is kind of like a height map, where white is closer to the camera and black is farther away. And then we have the denoiser pass. You'll notice as I switch between the denoiser and the raw render, you'll see how effective it is at removing noise in the final image. Okay, let's take a look at the lens effects now. It's very easy to just enable bloom and glare, start messing with the settings to get some really nice kind of blurred effects over the bright areas. So this is the bloom effect. And then we'll enable glare effect as well, which typically I want to make sure we use from render camera for the type. Right, so moving on. V-Ray for Rhino is fully integrated into Grasshopper. V-Ray nodes give you control over aspects of V-Ray for Rhino, such as lights, cameras, and materials. Baking and exporting are not required, as you can render straight from Grasshopper or render Grasshopper geometry from Rhino. So this is a script from Design Morphine. And first thing I'm going to do is we're going to use the node to render straight out of Grasshopper. We have a node set up here using the geometry and a simple material. You'll notice I can make changes to the simple material, such as the color, and it will update in the interactive rendering. You can also make changes that modify the geometry, such as this slider down here. And as I make changes to this, it will update. You'll notice it will update both in Rhino and in the frame buffer. The script is a little hefty, so it can take a second to update. I'm going to go ahead and stop this render, and I'll show you how it can work straight out of Rhino. Using the geometry document node, we're inputting these three meshes along with these three materials. The materials are already in the document. We're just telling Grasshopper's telling Rhino to use these materials. And you'll notice that now it's using those specific materials. And I can make modifications to the geometry, and it'll go feed into Rhino, which will feed into V-Ray. And one of the great benefits about this is we can use some other V-Ray specific tools along with what's happening from Grasshopper, such as the clipper plane. If I maximize the Rhino window, we'll add, well, actually I already have one in the scene. We'll enable the clipping plane. So then you can make modifications to the Grasshopper script while doing something like using a clipper plane to cut through it. All happening in the V-Ray frame buffer. Then something for the visualization specialists out there. We now have an easy way to send projects or parts of projects to 3D Studio Max using the Export VR Scene feature. It essentially works like a V-Ray proxy. It becomes a linked reference into the scene. I'll show you just how easy this is. In Rhino, all you need to do is go to the V-Ray menu, Export VR Scene, and I'm just going to go to my desktop and save this out. And if we go to 3D Studio Max, I already have a scene set up with a camera and some lights. And all I need to do is go to my object type, V-Ray scene object type. It'll prompt me for a VR scene file. And then there is essentially some proxy geometry for the VR scene. So I'm going to position this to be in view of the camera. Then we'll hit render, and then there it is straight out of Rhino and into 3D Studio Max. Right, and those of you familiar with our previous licensing system, I have some good news. We've changed our licensing from dongle licensing to online licensing. It is designed so that you can use your chaosgroup.com login to access your licenses, and then you have the ability to check them out for offline use as well. And then when you purchase a workstation license, you will receive a render node license as well, which can be used to render from other platforms such as SketchUp or Revit using Swarm. Then here's some of the pricing available for V-Ray for Rhino. I would recommend reaching out to Novedge for more information on monthly and yearly rentals, as well as special bundle offers, upgrade offers, and any other questions you may have. And I also encourage you to go to chaosgroup.com and sign up for a free, fully unlocked 30-day trial of V-Ray for Rhino or Revit or SketchUp or even Max or Maya. And then I also highly recommend that you check out our documentation pages and YouTube channel for more helpful information on using V-Ray. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and open it up for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you so much, Ben. We have a couple of questions, as a matter of fact, and actually they keep coming in. So Alan is asking, he asked a question, but then he figured it out, so he's updating the question. He says, I can't see the Hosek or any other colors from Sun Sky while using interactive render. He tried both Rhino Sun and V-Ray Sun. And also he would like to know which sun is better.
Sorry, is he referring to HOSEC versus the older methods of using the sky? HOSEC is actually it's the newest one and it's the best one.
Okay. And he says he can't see the Hosek or any other colors from Sun Sky while using the interactive render. And he says, and I can't see it in either V-Ray or Rhino. He can't see any sky colors.
I guess I'm a little unclear about the question. Feel free to email me about it and we can talk about it further.
Okay, fair enough. Are there any limitations of GPU versus CPU rendering?
There are a few limitations. We have a page on our docs site that lists some of those. There's some specific things. I can't remember them all offhand. I believe like infinite ground plane doesn't work in GPU, and there's a couple others. But for the most part, we have everything in CPU working in GPU.
Okay. Does the swarm rendering use only CPU rendering, or does GPU rendering work?
Either one works. Whichever one you have enabled here is what it'll use. So if you have GPU enabled, then Swarm will seek out machines that have CUDA enabled GPUs and we'll use them as well.
And if you use two video cards, can you use GPU optimization separately, one for the program and one for the renderer?
Yes, you have the ability to do that, and I believe I think if you email me, I'll get back to you on the exact way of doing that, but it is possible, yeah.
Okay, and then Alan is also asking, will Ben share those plugin buttons he has on the bottom of his screen?
Oh, that's T-splines.
Okay,
Right.
cool. I think that's actually, there's another question. Alan also was asking, how do you select V-Ray grass in order to apply material to it?
Sometimes it can be a little tricky. It's easy to just find it in the geometry list. As soon as you make something I'll just make a piece of geometry real quick. As soon as you make a piece of geometry and turn it into grass, then it is listed. And then the fur object is actually separate from the main geometry. This allows you to, let's say, assign a material to the base geometry and then assign a separate material to the grass itself. If that makes sense.
I hope so. I hope that answered your question, Alan. And that's it for now. I mean, I can leave the questions open for another couple of minutes while okay. If you have a second, can you set up that sun and sky again and show it rendering? Is that?
Sure. I think it's actually already set up in this scene. Oh, this is set for VR. So what I'm going to do is stop this. This is set for VR, and we don't want to do a VR rendering right now. So we'll just to standard, disable stereo. I'm on a separate computer right now, so I don't want to use GPU. And let me make sure my render output's good and start rendering. So this is using the dome light, but if I want to switch this back to the sun and sky system, I can, let's see, let's go to my lights, and I will disable that dome light. Then I will re-enable the Rhino document sun. Then this is using the HOSEC Sky system. And I believe this was Alan's question of how to change the sky model.
Yeah.
And HOSEC et al. Is the latest and greatest, and typically the most realistic in my opinion. And it's the newest one that we added with V-Ray 3. So I would leave that set to HOSEC et al. And then to make sure your sky is showing up, make sure that under your environment, that your background is using a sky texture.
Yeah, let us know if that works, Alan.
And then the sky will, you have to choose which sun you're using, but by default there's only one Rhino document sun unless you choose to add your own sun. Which then I guess it can get a little complicated. I tend to stick with just the default Rhino sun, which is always in the scene.
Cool.
Which is the sky.
Cool. Well, that looks fantastic. Great. While we wait for other questions, if they come in, I will take the screen back and start with my goodbyes and hellos. So thanks for joining us today. And I want to remind everyone to visit our webpage at novedge.com, where you can find the entire V-Ray product list in every shape or form at the best price. And for information on the latest specials and new releases, you can join the Novedge network. We're everywhere. And remember, the next week our webinar will be on AutoCAD LT 2018. And to rewatch today's webinar or previous ones, check out our Novedge YouTube and Vimeo channels, our webinar playlists as webinars for every software taste. Thank you so much, Ben, today. That was quite a trip, seeing all those beautiful rendering. Okay. Oh, a new question came in, so hang on just a second. When Rhino 6 will come in, will V-Ray work right away? V-Ray 3.
We may need a couple weeks to make sure it's up and running properly, because we don't want to release something that's buggy.
Okay.
But it'll be quickly, soon after it's released.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it already. Thank you so much, Ben, and everybody have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.